Welcome to tonight's episode of Old Fashioned Catholics. I'm Kevin.
I'm Nick.
We are two dads who are Catholics who like drinking old fashions. If this is your first time tuning into our show, we like to get together and talk about topics that are interesting to us while we share a beverage as friends. We invite you to join along with us. We find that our show is best enjoyed while sipping a beverage, either alcoholic or non. We're going to give you a chance to get your drink if you haven't yet, so you can pause it now.
Welcome back.
Right.
Okay.
So, Nick, this is, as is our custom, the part of the show where we talk about what we are drinking, and I am clearly not drinking a giant old fashioned.
That is the darkest old fashioned I've ever seen in my life.
Yes. So St. Patrick's Day was in the recent past, and I home brewed an oatmeal stout. So I thought it fitting to try it because it wasn't ready on St. Patrick's Day, but it's ready now.
How
so
is
that's
it?
what I'm drinking. It is really good.
Good.
It is really good.
Is that the first thing you've ever brewed or no?
No, and
Okay.
technically I've never brewed at all. It's my friend, and I just stand and support him while he brews, and
Really?
I help bottle it.
You go like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah, I stir with the stick. He knows all the stuff.
That's
But this is our third or fourth that we brewed together.
nice. It looks good.
Yeah. What are
I
you
love
drinking?
yours.
I saw a big bottle behind you there.
Yeah. So
Is that your special from Christmas?
yeah, my stepdad gave it to me.
Nice.
So yes, it's Woodford, and I'm going through. I'm just slowly processing through the entire selection of liquor that I have because raising money to go to the mission field and not having a lot coming in. So I'm just going to drink through what we have. So I'm guessing in later episodes it's going to be a lot of clear liquids, like vodka and stuff. Right now I have Woodford Reserve, some cherries mashed up in there, and simple syrup, and 6 dashes of bitters.
Yeah, if you're just tuning in and you've never seen our show before, Nick and his wife are going to be entering the mission field somewhere overseas. And it's been on their radar and something that they've been wanting to do for years and years and years. And they have done in the past. Now, with all their kids, they're going to be doing it again. It's a very exciting time. Don't want them to leave, but also know that they're being called on to this next stage. So,
Well,
Nick,
two
make sure to
things.
put the link. Make sure to put the link to your nonprofit in tonight's episode.
We can do that. We 2 things. One, earlier today, I purposely checked because we're thinking about Cambodia. I purposely checked they are exactly 12 hours apart. So for you to film at 10:30 at night, I'll just film at 10:30 in the morning, and I'm sure in Cambodia that's fine to drink that early. So we can still do episodes. There you
Perfect.
go. Yeah, and there was one other thing. I can't remember what the other thing was. So anyway, yeah, that's
Great.
what I'm drinking.
Before we get too much into it, we want to give everybody a fair intro and warning into what tonight's topic is, because if you've seen our other videos, we do a lot of lighter fare. We like to laugh. We like to talk about farts and
We joke, we jest.
Yeah, and being Catholic. So tonight's episode is a little bit different. You want to talk about that a little bit so that people can decide if they want to move on or if it's a topic that they really are interested in.
Yeah. So especially since last week's episode was so lighthearted and stuff, it's good to have a warning out there. So we're going to be talking about trafficking, human trafficking, mostly sex trafficking, and which, I've in recent years, it's been a part of my life, a growing part of prevention and whatnot and awareness. So I've spoken to the kids about it. So if you are at that place and you've talked to your kids about it, that's fine if they're a little older. But some of the stuff we do talk about is pretty disturbing. And they kind of wanted to do the episode to get some awareness out there and encourage people. So just be aware, like there's heavy stuff ahead. There won't be much joking tonight, but it's because it's a really important topic.
Yeah. I mean, most of our stuff is very family friendly.
Yeah.
And we, of course, want parents talking to their kids about this, but we don't want your kids learning about it from this video, in essence.
Well, and that would be the thing. Like there are videos out there. There are commercials made for families to watch with their kids to start to explain like things, even awareness and what to look for. And but it's not us. We're just trying to talk about it like 2 guys talking about something that they're concerned about.
Right.
Yeah.
In the way that we talk about anything that we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
And what we can't forget, which I think we forgot, is a toast tonight. So you are
Oh,
in charge of tonight's toast. Do you want to do it now or do you want to do it at the end?
I'll do it at the end.
All right, great.
Gives me time to think about it.
So Nick, uh this is a topic that you brought onto our slate of something we could do an episode on. What was on your mind? Why did you want to discuss this? Why is it so uh important to you, or why is it on your heart?
Yeah, like when we lived overseas, we lived in China and we got to visit Thailand and stuff. And when you're in cultures like that, sadly, it's just kind of out in the open. It's just everywhere. It's just out there, and so it's kind of a given. You when you like we if you're sitting at a outdoor part of a little restaurant or a cafe in Bangkok, then it's not surprising to see a girl just walk up and show herself to a guy, and if the guy says yeah, then they just kind of go off somewhere together, and it's just sort of just out. It's just a very, very, and it's a known thing, and so there's I knew it existed, but when the lockdowns happened last year, I started to get a bunch of stuff across my feed about prevention, human trafficking prevention, and sex trafficking, and online child porn and stuff like that, and it just became aware. I became aware that it is just as prevalent here in the United States, and it's the largest growing black market industry in the world. The U.S. is the number one consumer of online child porn. Like all these things that I just didn't realize were, and some of the stories that we'll talk about tonight, they all kind of hit me in like a couple week time frame that I was just like, holy cow! If this is so, I guess it came to the point I was like, well, if you know about something like that, and I'm vocal about everything, and I claim to care about things, then I need to get involved somehow. And so then I had started, just small donations, like I'll make a monthly donation to a group. But then it just seems to not be enough. And so then it started to grow. And so I brought it up to Kevin and just said, we should really talk about it, man. And so Kevin's gone through this training with this group that we'll talk about. And it just hasn't left my heart. And it's so I'm struggling to find ways to implement the knowledge that I have. And I've tried locally, and I just, and we're kind of seeming to be on our way out. And so I didn't get anything started here. But I knew with us, this show, we have, maybe 400 people will see this, and maybe that can, impact in exponentially other people.
That's really interesting. How do you think it is that it is so open in other countries, to use your word, in Thailand or Cambodia, where it's just known about and just out in the open, yet the US is the largest consumer of child porn? How is it that way, yet it's so hidden in the US, but we are participating in it more than anybody?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, I'll speculate. I don't have any.
Oh, that's all I want from you,
Okay.
actually. You
Yeah,
speculate all
I'm
day.
thinking about it right now for the first time. I would speculate that it stems from a combination of America's Christian and puritanical roots, where sexuality has always been a tough issue. Um, and so, because it has been a tough issue with a bunch of questionable policies when it comes to sexuality, and growing up in a household, not just me, but growing up in a household where you couldn't talk about things, but yet we're sexual beings. And so repress, repress, repress. And then underneath, you still have to find a way to release. And so I think underneath that lingers, like broken sexuality, broken lust lingers. But with the advent of online everything, online porn and online trafficking, you can you can not be found out. You can have a VPN or whatever, and you can just be in your home and degrade and degrade and degrade. Whereas, like in Thailand, it has no Christian influence or very little Christian influence, and you get a place that it's that for a long time, even back in this is 2005 when we were there, it was common that when a child was born, you give them a male and a female name, and then you kind of let them choose what they want to be. And that's how it gets manifested in their culture. We don't have time to go into the theology of the body implications about that. And like, this isn't that episode, but it's just sexuality is openly embraced for different reasons, some of them religious, whereas the religious influence in America has been to the opposite. I think they're both extremes. I think theology of the body is the answer to all that. I mean, it's the middle ground. Is the answer is like, you can't repress and you can't just release. You have to redeem. So I think I would be willing to bet that that is part of the main influence, is the combination of the religious side of things, and confusion about sexuality, but then the advent of just online everything. You can live your life in your apartment and never leave, and you can have things brought to you that that no one will ever know. And you can online, you can purchase a human online, and you can demand what be done to them on the camera, and it will. So like, it just, those two combined, I think, and just made the hellstorm that it is for the online side.
And you mentioned the lockdowns and the COVID lockdowns, and I would imagine that if I'm thinking about it at face value, I would think that it would decrease the
Yep,
things that are happening. But
that's what I
as
thought.
you're talking, you're saying it has actually exacerbated the problem or made it worse. Is that
Quadrupled. Yep.
right?
Yeah, the people that I work with when it comes to the trafficking, they were putting out stuff even as of June of last year saying that the lockdowns have quadrupled the trafficking, and not just online, but predominantly online. It had quadrupled, because suddenly you get the guy who, he's normally going to work, and he's busy all day long, and he comes home, um, and so most of his day is used up with his job. Well, now he's just home and can purchase and order and view and abuse. Um, and then you got a bunch of people who, because trafficking is a racket and an industry. You had people who, they already had farms of people. Like, for instance, in California, one of the cases that the group that I work with talks about is that they found a guy who, he had women that they would get them pregnant so that they could rape and sell the babies. And so this was just in house. So they had women that they would impregnate, and on a lockdown, that doesn't get impacted. And so when it came to certain things, it actually improved their ability to do the horrific things that they do, because nobody was going to anyone's home. There was nobody seeing things happen in the neighborhood. So I think that made it a lot worse. Probably for other reasons too that my mind doesn't grasp. But
I imagine for some people this is totally new, and for some people they know about it. How do you find the balance of educating yourself and arming yourself while not spiraling down into the endless pit of disgustingness? Because it sounds, I mean, even that example you just said, to me, I'm just like, that's the worst thing I can ever even imagine. Like, I would want to kill
yeah,
anybody who
yeah,
was involved with that. Or, it's just like my gut, it's just so visceral, but it's the internet, so it's never ending. So how do you not fall into that trap, even if you have good intentions?
yeah. I don't know. Just, I can only speak in my case. It's just been grace. I mean, there's been times I've just been sitting up in the night, kind of crying, uh, because th- and I guess we prepped people, but like, yeah, the baby organ harvesting industry is real and growing, and so you can impregnate a woman, and sell multiple parts of the baby. Once the baby's born, you can kill it and then sell its parts. And like, I think for me, knowing that that is real, that it's not like a movie. Like, one of my favorite movies is Taken, like, for so many reasons. Like, I just think that
I'm with
movie
you.
is so, it's like dad you want to be. You know what I mean? Like, but also like, it's a good analogy of salvation history and stuff, from Eden all the way to Jesus. But like, it's so not Taken. I mean, that Taken happens, but the majority of it is nothing like that. The majority of it is so quiet, hidden, plain looking, and evil. So evil. Like, that movie is a PG movie, I think, or PG
PG
13. Sorry,
13.
PG 13. Like, they didn't even go R with it. So like, that's a really benign. Like, they don't. When you hear survivor stories, that movie, maybe it spawned some awareness, but it didn't come anywhere close to the reality that a 6-year-old girl faces when she's really in it. For instance, again, like, just because we're doing it, um, There was a survivor story of a girl. I think she was in Vegas, in Nevada, and she moved to a new town. Her and her dad. She was like 13. She met a girl at school. She was a new kid, and she met a girl at school. Really nice. They hit it off. And at some point after the friendship had formed, the girl was like, "You should just come. You could make some extra money working at my dad's. I think he owned like a art framing shop or something. You can work at my dad's office. I make money like twice a week." And she was like, "Yo, you'd have to. Your dad would have to meet my dad." And she was like, "Yeah, that's fine." And so the dads met and they hit it off. And the dad was like, "Sure, she can come, Tuesday night." And so she got picked up Tuesday night, and they didn't drive her to the place. They drove her to a warehouse, and the gang raped her for 6 hours, and they videotaped all of it. And when they were done, they told her, "We'll show this to your dad if you tell anybody, and he'll be disappointed in you because this is your fault." And then she was in the life, like just like that. She was in it. And like for me, the fact that that's real, the fact that that actually happens, like I I guess there was a few weeks where like I just processed through it and was just like, okay, well, that's enough to crush a person. That's enough to crush somebody who hears about it, let alone the girl in it. But if there's anything that like a dad of 5 can do in International Falls, Minnesota, then you just better bet that I'm going to do it. So then I started to look around for ways to reach out, and one was through Operation Underground Railroad. Tim Ballard runs it, and um, that's I guess where I found a home. There are a ton, and we're going to provide so many links in the description. Like I'm looking at the document, there's link after link after link of different organizations that deal with this, but the one that I settled with was these guys, the guys at the Fine Guardy. Um, and that's how I dealt with it. Like I cried a lot, and I still get kicked in the stomach with it a lot when I think about it. And I'm not even doing anything. Like I'm not working any day in, day out. But it just, it kind of, I think, oh, well, that's what it is. Tim Ballard, the guy who runs it, he said, at one point he realized he had been always, because he had 7 kids, he'd be out on a mission where they're, busting some fake orphanage that was just selling kids for 10 grand a piece. And he would be just like, okay, like distancing from it and thinking like, and not letting himself think that could be my kid, like just kind of just being like, okay, cold about it. But then his wife had told him like, no, you kind of have to let that in because it could be our kid. So that grief, you need to let that be real. And so he kind of let that in and lets that kind of spur him on. And I think I tried to follow suit with that in the small way that I'm doing. Again, I'm doing very little. We're doing the show, but like I think that's what I've done, is tried to like let it hurt me enough that I don't keep forgetting about it and just going on with my day of raising the 5 kids. Because when I've talked to the life care center in town, or the Northern Options for Women, what have you experienced? Have you experienced trafficking? And they're like, well, not trafficking like a ring or anything, but we do know that there are moms who will sell their little kids for sex, 1 or 2 times so they can get drug money. Is that? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like it's just here, it's in everywhere. So that's how I've handled it, is try to let it, not gotten rid of the pain, but kind of let it spur me on, hopefully.
It's interesting that you should say that because just you telling that story about the girl in Las Vegas makes so many feelings instantaneously well up within me.
Mhm.
Like first it's like anger and then it's like powerlessness as a parent. Like the dad met the other dad.
He did what
That's
he was
like
supposed to,
that's like your check mark as a parent. It's like, as long as I meet the parents, everything is okay. And have no idea what someone else is up to,
Yeah.
what they're actually going to do with your kid. So then it's like terrifying. Then it's like, okay, I'm going to put my kids in a bubble and we're going to fortify
Yep.
our 4,000-acre property that we don't have.
Yeah.
And we're just going to hide in the wilderness
Where do you what?
until we die.
Yeah.
But it's like, you want to do everything in your power to protect them. But, find Gordy on your hat. That was the story that changed the way I thought about it, because Gordy is is integral to the forming of Operation Underground Railroad, which is a link that we'll have. Make sure to check them out. They are at the forefront of this fight. But that story, their mission kind of has its impetus in a boy named Gordy. And I don't really want to get into his story all that much because there's a lot to talk about tonight, but just a little tease for people. It is really, it is worth it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like praying for the day. And it reminds me, like before I go to bed tonight, I need to say a prayer for
Yeah.
Gordy again. And
Well,
just,
that's what I've been doing.
if they
That
find him, I will I will poop my pants, man.
Yeah, I know that's the thing. I think that's what keeps them all going, like including his dad, like the kid's dad still, because it's just a kid that was trafficked, and they keep finding leads, and then they'll show up a couple of days behind when he got trafficked out somewhere else. And so, yeah, I pray for him almost every day. Yeah.
The other thing it makes you think about is how incredibly huge the population of Earth is. Like
Yeah.
there's all these things happening, like millions and millions of people, and it's just like you could be looking for this one person and they're just invisible. You cannot find them, even though that's all you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Ah,
Oh, I know. One of the things, because you said, like, how do you fight it? One of the things that stood out the most recently to me was because I listened to a bunch of survivor stories from people in Vegas, and a common theme, like that traffickers have different methods that they use, but they follow a system. I mean, it's it's so like math to them. It's just A plus B equals C. And one of the things you hear from like common denominator in all these women was like completely low self-esteem and no one to turn to at home. Like they will just say like, no, if I had had dignity and known my self-worth, I never would have fallen for any of this, because that's what they prey on. Like this one girl was saying, she was she was a bit of an outsider, her like a really broken home. Neither her parents, they were divorced, but neither paid any attention to her. And she was just sort of a brooding, lonely person. That's what happens. And she was young. She was like 16, I think. She was with a group of friends, but she was still the kind of the outcast. So they're at the mall, and she's kind of sitting, they're all talking and laughing, and she's just off a little bit. That's all, just off from the group. And she's with them, obviously. And just in looking around, she sees a guy who's like waved at her and was like, come here. And she's like looked and where he's like, yeah, he smiled and come over. And she came over and he's like, you look like you're really upset or you're sad or lonely. Are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm okay. And he's like, okay, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. You just seemed like you were feeling low. And, one of the things I do is I talk to people if they need it. So here's my card. And if you ever want to call me and just talk, I'm there. And she said she, kept the card, but just like didn't even think twice, and went home and got yelled at by her parents or whatever. And at some point she called the guy and he's like, well, do you want to sit up and like meet for coffee? And she's like, yeah. So they met. And she says, looking back, it wasn't even the same guy, but she didn't notice at the time because she just wanted somebody to care. And they began a like actual relationship for a long period of time. And he would just let her talk. What are your hopes, your dreams? What do you want to do with your life? What do you hope? And she, I want a big wedding, and with a bunch of people there, and happy marriage. And then he built a relationship. And then at some point he just came on with like, hey, all that stuff you want, this can happen. But we just have to do some stuff that we don't want to do in the meantime, just to get the money to like, because we can have a good wedding. We run away together. And like everything that they did preyed upon the desire for goodness and love and stability and happiness and a good home. And so one of the things that you as a parent can do for sure, like concretely, is to give your daughter the safety to always, I mean, think about that girl who, obviously it was a broken home because there was no mom in the picture, and she didn't think she could tell her dad. Like she believed the lie, you can't tell your dad what had happened, even though none of it was her fault. She had like a lack of a strength of relationship. So that's what you can do, is you start with your daughters and your sons and let them know that they can always tell you, and that they don't ever have to be afraid of you, that, like just those sort of things. Like I think that seems to be something that is a common denominator, is you can have that type of home. If you want to fight it firsthand with your kids, that's the place to start.
how did she get out of it? That girl that you were talking about with the guy that formed a coffee shop relationship with her, and then he ended up trafficking her out,
Oh, that
right?
girl. Um, Shoot, her story was long. She was in and out of it. That's the problem. See, what happens is, like, she was one of those people that, like, I think she addressed it, was like, people think you get into that life because you want to, or you need a few bucks, and so you get into it and you turn some tricks, and that's why you get into it. She's like, that's not how anybody gets into it. That's a lie. And they actually criticize. There was, in this one thing I saw from Vegas, one of the senators or representatives was just saying like they were so upset with how Vegas is portrayed, because it's the whole like, you come here, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, and pimps, they get this view like they're evil people, but they get this veneer from Hollywood or whatever. So she got trafficked then to handle the pain and to handle the PTSD, they give you drugs. And so then you're on drugs. Well, then I think it was her story that was just like, even when she got arrested a bunch, and even then, girls in prostitution, if they're underage, they get arrested. Well, if it's illegal wherever they're underage or not, you get arrested. You're in jail. It's not your fault. But you're in jail as this young girl, and then you can't go home. So anyway, she got bounced around. She'd get out of the life and in the life, and she'd be addicted to drugs and get off, and that just sets this whole cycle. And it was way far into her life, like 10 or whatever years, 20 years down the road, she got out. And a large of, I think it was because of a ministry. There's a ministry in Vegas that does stuff, and I think a lot of them end up, and it's so beautiful, a lot of these women, you hear them talking about God and how God, his love is what got them out of it. And so I can't remember her story exactly, but they're very similar. Just that, like, well, they'll even say that, like, a lot of them, this one girl, I remember her saying, like, I was watching the news one night on TV, and then they were talking about trafficking. I didn't even know what that was. And I was listening to these women's stories, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm being trafficked. And they'll tell you that a lot. Like, there's no guards, there's no like dogs or people with guns telling you can't leave. You can leave at any time, but you don't think that you're a slave. Like, it's modern day slavery. They don't think they are, because
So the genius of modern day slavery for many, not for all, but for many, is that they don't know they're enslaved. Is that what you're saying?
you know, yeah, because it's clear. I mean, they'll say that, like, no, and they'll even talk about, if you go in and just try to tell a girl, listen, I'm going to get you out of here. You're a slave to this. You don't have to be with these people. Get out. They will often just be like, no, get out of here. This is like, they call him their daddy, like, and just they call them their daddy. Like, that's the term that they use for the pimp, is their daddy. Like, just a little girl's term for their father is what they use. And so again, they prey on that idea that no, he's my daddy. Like, at least, even if I'm not making money, I have all these nice things. And I was on the street before, I was in a broken home before, I didn't know any love before, and at least now I know this. So it's like, if you just attack it head on like that, it can be very difficult. Not always, but they don't realize that they're enslaved.
Wow. I mean, if you're still watching this right now, this isn't some out there proposition or conspiracy theory or anything like that. This is happening in our backyard. This is
Yeah.
happening in our towns. This is happening under our nose. And it's not just hitting close to home, it's running rampant. It's just a silent scourge. And to know that a guy, or to know that one you shared about the girl at the mall, and then she meets the guy for coffee, and it's like it's a different guy than the guy who originally talked with her. The fact that the intentions can be so evil, but their method of operation is so charismatic, so caring, so loving, and so patient in some cases that people just get sucked into it is terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, for me, as a father of a daughter, or just a father at all, like, that's terrifying to me.
Well, I remember. Okay, there's one of the women, and she gave a TED talk, but she said, "You never have felt as good as you feel when they first meet you, like you, because they find the right type of person, like the right victim, but." They were just saying that it is everything you've ever dreamed of. It is like, it's the person. They sit and listen to you talk for hours. They tell you you're beautiful. They listen to your hopes and dreams. They buy things for you. They take you on trips. It's it's love. It's everything you ever wanted. And so, like, that's the betrayal at the core. Like, that's so painful, is that then when it's not, it just brings this hopelessness of like, well, then it never exists. If if this was as good as it gets, and it turns out to be this, that I
Mhm.
mean, I'm just used, then there's no hope. And that's what it breeds in people. Again, it's a certain, oh, good.
No, I'm just listening. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, that's that. And they know. So for instance, if you go up to a girl and you're like, hey, you're really pretty. And do you want to come with me? Somebody who comes from like a home where they've just known love and have been nurtured, they can sense something is wrong. Like when they've seen their father's loving gaze, when they've seen like actual love and support and not whatever, they can tell that. But when you don't, when you're starved for it, then, and so many people are, I mean, in a certain sense, who isn't, but in a certain sense as well, like with broken homes being like, again, they talk about that with the lockdown, girls who like, well, their dad's in his office looking at porn or whatever, and the mom is online and doing whatever, Pinterest, or like everybody in the family is on their own thing. And well, even here in town, I was talking to the sheriff, like, what sort of things have you seen? And he just said, actually, the thing that stands out the most is that my own kids, whatever app you're on, it doesn't matter if it has any sort of DM, like direct message function, like a chat function of any kind. It's sometimes within minutes they get propositioned like, hey, I noticed you're in, International Falls. I'm from there. Oh, you're 9 years old. I'm 9 years old or whatever. And they start to glean information. And then before you know it, it's like, hey, can you send me a picture? Can you do this and that? Like it just, it, it proliferated so much with the lockdowns that like this preying upon that weakness inside of wanting a loving father and stability, like it just hits so hard. Yeah. So
But don't you think it's not even just preying upon weakness? In a lot of cases, it's preying upon innocence,
sure. Yeah.
naivety, or preying upon people's natural tendency to try and think other people are generally good.
Yeah.
As an example, I have a friend here in my city who, um, you know, I only know this individual's mom, but she had a great mom, um, loving and supportive and took care of her. And she was, um, this friend of mine was out like at a city's, nightclub, dance club, everyone's dancing to techno music and hip hop. And she made an acquaintance with a man. He was interested in her, told her how awesome she was, how beautiful she was. Then he tells her he's a professional photographer. He does modeling. He does photography for models, and she can make a ton of money because of how beautiful she is. He would love to fly her out to Las Vegas. He will pay for everything, her hotel, her flight. She'll get paid, and she might become famous. And this opportunity has never come up before. She's
Sure.
never, she's not one to just fall for a lie, but the in part, it could be like you want to assume that what a person is telling you is the truth, even
Sure.
if you're a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. Anyways, she goes and does it and gets there and finds out it is none of those things. It is way worse.
Hmm.
Um, the silver lining is that she got through it and got back home, because it could have very easily been she goes there and never returns because she didn't tell anybody that she was going. Um, Told her parents after and
Sure.
told them what happened, and was, saved from actually being trafficked. But in a sense, like that was the route
Hmm.
and was this close.
Yeah. Did I mean, did she have a near, like a narrow escape, like realized and ran, or did
I think
like,
what it was more like a porn shoot, and
okay.
then like she was stuck and
Yeah.
did the shoot and then
Sure.
got done and didn't get trafficked, and was able to get back on that plane and get home.
Gosh. Well, and that's the thing. I think, again, you said she had a good relationship with her mom. I don't know
Yeah,
what her
so
relationship with her
so
dad.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as far as I know,
Sure.
and someone who was well grounded, had a
Sure.
faith life, was a convert, I mean, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um, but the I don't know, naivety, innocence, but maybe it is all still stem from that same brokenness that we all have, of just wanting so bad to be accepted and desirable and
Well,
loved.
because you think about it, like, well, the saving grace would have been that girl felt confident enough to be like, because, and that's where it is. It's after the moment of the fall, not that she fell, but the moment of like when they would pray, when they'd be like, so now we got you. that you did this. It's not like you're going to go back and tell people, right? You just need to keep doing it. She had the self-confidence to be like, no, that was a mistake, but I'm out. I'm still free. Like that. And that came from home. That came
Yeah.
from, even if she didn't tell her
Word,
parents or
man.
whatever, she had that strength, because that's what would have happened is in the past, or like if with other people, if there hadn't been that confidence and that upbringing to be like, because a mistake is one thing. I mean, everybody wants to be. So if you're pretty and somebody tells you, I mean, like you could be like pretty, you could be famous. Well, of course, like, okay, I'll try that. Like, why not? You think about Leah Darrow, like her whole story is one of she was America's top model. And she ended up, being in the midst of this just wretched life. And the reason she got out was she called her dad. She was in New York and he was in somewhere in the Midwest, and just crying, like, daddy, I can't do it. And her dad like hung up the phone and drove straight to New York City and opened up the door and didn't say a thing, just got her. And like that, that is probably what saved your friend, because so many people don't have that. There's this one story, this girl, she, she was, I think it was in Nebraska. Her parents worked a lot, so she would stay with her grandma. And she was just, maybe 14, 15. No, she would have been 14 or 13. Anyway, she was, in the neighborhood. They were in a cul-de-sac. Her grandma lived in this cul-de-sac in Nebraska, some town. And she'd be there. And at one point she was out playing, and some little older kid, he was like 15, like a 15-year-old boy. That's my son. That's Christian. 15-year-old kid was like, just showed her interest. And they hung out. Like, that's it. They hung out. And then he was like, I really like you. And, do you want to come over? And she's like, yeah. And nothing happened. She came over and hung out. And he was like, I've noticed that there's like a dirt path between your grandma's house and mine. You could come over whenever you want. She's like, okay. So then anytime she was there, she'd just go over to his place. And eventually one time he showed her porn and was like, this is crazy. And then she's like, yeah, weird. And then at one point he's like, do you want to try these things? And then she's like, I don't know. He's like, I really like it. I like you. You're prettier than them. And then they started having a sexual relationship. Well, then at one point, and again, grandma is 3 houses away. And at one point
Ah,
she came over one day, and she walked in the room and there was her boyfriend and then another guy. And the guy and her non-boyfriend boyfriend was just like, this guy's going to give me $50 if you do this. What you've been doing with me, like what we saw in the videos, if you do that to him, we get $50. And she was like, okay. And then it just started the thing where like multiple guys every day would come over while grandma's 3 houses away, thinking she's playing with some neighbor kid. And um and that's one of the problems is like she got stuck in that, like, well, I could never tell anybody. And I remember somebody asking, well, how did you get out of it? And she said, well, I got breasts. I said, I hit puberty, and when I hit puberty they didn't want me anymore, so I was out. And like the story up to that point is hard enough as it is, like that's even, all the failure and the brokenness of the parents and the grandparents at that point, that crushing weight is almost too much. And then to hear that, and she was so just that, I mean, she was just like, yeah, that's why I got up. They didn't want somebody who had gone to puberty. They just wanted a little girl. Like, that's how she was saved. It wasn't her dad or her mom or her grandparents. It was because she hit puberty. Like, yeah, it's just, and that's where like I tell that one to say, like, that was in a no-name town with the cul-de-sac. And you don't want to be alarmist. You don't want to be like a fear monger. But if it's actual, like if it's real, that's not alarm. That's not that's not alarmist. If it's actually like, I mean, in Duluth, Minnesota, a few years back, they uncovered that whole like Russian boys being shipped in through the port. Like it's just everywhere. And like, I think that would be the reason to do a show like this, is to like, that's not in Ukraine, and that's not in, Thailand. That's Nebraska. That's Duluth, Minnesota. That's Minnesota itself has a huge problem with it down in Minneapolis area. Like, it's just everywhere. And it's so clever, and it's very clever because it doesn't look like what the movies say it looks like anymore. It's just, and the problem is when a girl gets into it and her pride is broken and her hope is gone, then they always say, like, with drugs, if you sell, if you sell a gram, you sell it and it's gone. But if you have a girl, you can sell her 40 times a day indefinitely, and until she hits puberty, until she's no longer wanted. it's over and over and over. And so like that reality is all around. And you just have to fight it. You just, once you know, and that's the difference. Like once you know, once those scales fall off, you can't go back. You start to, you want to, like I go through airports. I want to see, I want to find it. Like I want to like identify it and like call it out.
But if you
And
do, so let's go to that because we're almost
okay.
out of time here. What if you had that opportunity, what would you do? What's wise and what isn't? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it depends on the situation. So in the links below, there are a ton of really good links. There's a group called where is it? I love their site. humantraffickingsearch.org. We have a bunch of links from them, but so anyway, there's a ton of links below. There are things to do in different situations. If you're in a situation where you suspect it's happening, well, first to look for the signs. If you are in public and you're interacting with people, and you see a young girl who's dressed pretty provocatively, but she's obviously younger than would be dressing that way. Won't make eye contact, any visible bruises. If there happens to, if I mean, it's almost like a sure sign. If there happens to be an older male that stands off to the side, if this person won't answer questions but defers to that person, things like that, those are all like red flags. And they're real. They're again, because you have encountered trafficking, you just don't know it. You've met girls, you've passed girls in the grocery store who are being trafficked as you pass them. You just don't know it. So you look for those signs. Girls who won't talk for themselves, who will defer to somebody else. Girls who don't know things like where they live, and won't tell you what their job is. Things like that. If you start to suspect, then there are things you can do. If you are in a public place with a ton of people around, and law enforcement happens to be nearby or something, or if you're in an airport, especially if you're in a large group of people, notifying somebody is a good idea. Even publicly, just like that person right there, I suspect this, will you look into it? Because you're not identified, you can slip away, whatever. If you get like they talk about people, if you run a business like where you have a cashier, and a girl comes in, or if you are actually, again, we should address that sex trafficking isn't the only thing. Labor trafficking is massive. Millions and millions of people labor trafficked into America. They're told that they can come to America and make a good wage and send money home, and they get here and it's a different thing altogether. They're just, again, with all the talk of slavery, this is actual human slavery, and it's worldwide, and the U.S. is one of the top purveyors of it. So if you happen to be in a place where, say, you're going to a restaurant or to a fast food restaurant, and you can tell somebody, you just, some of the signs show up or whatever. If you can engage and just say, hey, where are you from? Like, what are you doing here? And if a girl starts to show the signs and it doesn't seem like anyone else is around, like one of the pimps or the daddies, then you can address, you can talk to and say, like, I can offer you help or whatever. But if you don't ever engage with the male, if you happen to see, no, I mean, don't ever. I mean, it is so gosh, it is so common to hear girls say, so and so crossed the daddy, and then we watched as they kicked her head in, and then we all knew what to do and what not to do. Like that. That sounds like a movie. That is not uncommon, because they're abused daily. They're physically abused. If they get pregnant by some random chance, they'll beat the child to death inside the mom. And so don't ever approach a daddy. Don't ever approach any sort of pimp or trafficker. You can wait till you leave, because you are in danger if you do something like that. You wait till you're out of sight and you contact 911. You can there are any number of ways, and we're going to provide so many links below that you can look at. There's all the hotlines and the different places you can contact immediately. 911 is actually really, really good, to be honest. Even if it's after the fact. That happened to me. I was staying in a hotel in Houston. I was in my hotel room waiting for my roommate to show up. He hadn't flown in yet. And the door, someone was a knock on the door, and I went to the door and I opened it, and a girl just started to walk in, and I was like, oh, hey, I think you have the wrong room. I don't know. She was an adult, but she was like, this is room 420, right? And I was like, well, yeah, but I don't know you. And she's like, all right. And then walked away. And like, it was only when the trafficking stuff started to come into my mind that I was like, oh my gosh, like I was so oblivious. I didn't do a thing. I called the Houston Police Department and for that, district, and I talked to the people who handle sex trafficking in that area, and they were like, "Yep, that's a common hotel, that's a common area, and we're gonna log it. And do you mind if your name is on record?" And I'm like, "I don't mind. I just, And they're like, "No, we really appreciate, even if we can't do anything about things now, it's one more thing for our statistics to understand." And so even if it's after the fact, even if it's later, and you remember something, you contact 911. Yeah, yeah, you can. So in my phone, I'll show you. This is actually this is good. This is what the reason I have this number in my phone is because at one point I was listening to a talk, and they said, "Everybody take out your phone right now." So everybody take out your phone
Take
right
out
now.
your phone.
Take out your phone.
I already have it on my phone,
All
but
right,
take out your
yeah,
phone.
you do. I'll wait. All right, so I put it in my phone number as my phone as slavery because that's just what the lady said. Put it as slavery or something you're going to remember.
Bit on the nose, Nick.
Yep. Thanks. I know that's just what they said to do. So, and you just type in 888-3737-888. 888-3737-888. That's 888-3737-888.
Call
Just
today.
just call now. Like remember it, put it in your phone because again, that's like other than 911, if you're in a moment and you see, gosh, that does not look right. Like any number of things. And again, I'm not listing all the things because this isn't a training. Then you call 911, you report it, and then call 888-3737-888 and get it on record with them as well. The other thing is, so the group that I am just a part of, and again, I'm able to give $10 a month to this group, to Operation Underground Railroad. If you can give more, give more. But they're they're active in fighting trafficking all over. Like they're active in it, and so like when they're pretty open as well as what you see. Like so when you give to them and you see what they're doing, their reports they update you quite often on what they've been doing and what different busts they've done. And but the important thing is to get involved in something then to like. So if you're listening now and this is moving and compelling to you, which I don't know how knowing these things couldn't be. The really important thing is to act now and just get involved in some way or another. Donating is one, absolutely, but you can the things we've told you and the things that the links below have, like they're empowering. They can teach you what to look for and how to train others. Kevin and I have both gone through Operation Underground Railroads. Like it takes like an hour to watch through their YouTube videos. And in fact, I have all their YouTube videos linked below. So even if you don't register with them, they have their YouTube links online on YouTube or their training links. You can go on and just go through the trainings. They're in order in the description below. Just get trained in what to look for. There's emotional and physical tells, signs of trafficking and signs of abuse. And I would just say, like, at least that's a good first step. I don't know, Kevin, if you have anything else you want to say.
No, I mean I would echo that exact same thing. And actually I was going to ask you with all of our links, where do you think that if someone wants to start somewhere on one link, what's the first one? Is it the Operation Underground Railroad origin story? Is it the first training video? What are your thoughts?
Gosh. Well, okay. So in the links below, if I can, I don't know how the copy and paste will do. If I can make it work, I have a whole list of survivor accounts. But you can do that yourself. I mean, to be honest, when you're done watching this, or even stop now, and just in YouTube, just human trafficking survivor accounts, just watch some for a while. Like, don't shy away from it. Just let that in. Let all the human suffering. I always say that there's a world of pain that can just shatter you if you let it in. If you let it in, like to the real level. But in a certain sense, that's what Christ did. So I would say watch a bunch of survivor stories, people who made it out, who can tell you what it's really like and how they got trafficked in and things like that. But then, yeah, go to Operation Underground Railroad. And again, they're not the only. There are so many. Operation Polaris is huge. They're amazing too. But there are a ton of them. There are a ton of people doing really good work with this. We're looking at moving to Cambodia, and there's whole groups already fighting it there. All I can say is watch the survivor videos, and then if at the very least, just we'll have the links to all the Operation Underground Railroad training videos. There's their movie Operation Toussaint. Yeah. Operation Toussaint is the one that Operation Underground Railroad put out, and I think you can see it on Amazon Prime with ads. You can see it free. But just watch their origin story. Watch how they started, and they started like so many other organizations started, with just seeing a need and like just being like, I'm not gonna stop. Tim Ballard's story is so good though. Like and
Mhm.
he's gregarious. He's a good looking guy. He knows how to get the story across, and that's half the battle to get people to listen. So I would say start there. What about you, Kevin? Having done the training and stuff, what do you think?
For me, it actually was that Operation Toussaint or Toussaint, however you say it,
Toussaint, yeah,
French,
Toussaint.
but Toussaint. I watched that, and um, that's really just what got me interested in having myself educated and being a part of the solution, in some tiny way. And mainly that's just knowing the difference or knowing what's up and seeing the signs. But it was that's where I started.
I'm glad you said that, because 50% or over 50% of people who get out of trafficking, they do so because somebody saw some signs and reported it. Like over 50%. So right now, I can't remember the stat of millions. There's easily 10 million children in sex slavery in the world. Easily 10 million. I can't remember the exact number. But out of all the people that have made it out alive, 50% of them made it out because somebody like Kevin or I saw something and then reported it. Like 50%. So you could say half of them. And so if more people are aware of what the signs are and know what to do in that moment, then that's 50% of them. You could raise that number so much just by knowing what to look for. And so again, that training shows like there's two parts of physical signs, and there's an emotional sign, and there are all these like psychological things to look for. And when you can identify it, then again, hopefully you do start looking around in your neighborhood. Hopefully you do. I talked to one girl who's like, yeah, I fly a lot, and now I've started to look on the airplanes. I know one time I actually noticed something, and I did report it, and things like that. That's what does it. You don't have to be. It's funny because I don't know, maybe that's as a guy or whatever, but the first thing I did was go to Operation Underground Railroad and look for like their jump teams, the ones who like go in and like do the busts, and they're like, we're not accepting applications in any way, because I think that's what everybody does. Is like, oh, give me a gun, I'll go. Like, because dads get really mad. You hear this and you're like, I'll kill anyone you tell if they're doing this. Like, but basically when it comes down to it, they're like, you can host some fundraisers to help us out, and some awareness stuff, and you can train people. And so that's what I hope to do wherever we are, is just things like this. It's very easy to look for signs. It's just when you don't know them, you just assume like, well, yeah, but that's in Thailand. Like that's maybe in Vegas, that makes sense, but that's not in Duluth. That's not in, wherever.
Oh man.
Oh, and I did want to say this one more thing. I'm going to
Okay.
click the link so I can read it out loud. The It's loading. So at the USCCB website, they have the Coalition of Catholic Organizations Against Human Trafficking. So there, if you're looking for like in the Catholic realm, there might be more, but like there is a coalition of Catholic organizations who are fighting this. And so again, I got into this, like my gateway into it was Operation Underground Railroad. Look up, find Gardy. Their whole story, it's insane. We didn't tell it tonight because we would cry. It's too much. It's too amazing. It's too good. But there are Catholic organizations that are doing the same thing, that are fighting it, and get involved. Get it, just like close your eyes and pick one on the screen and just get involved. Like
Click.
just get involved. Start giving of your time, treasure, and talent, because you can save humans. You can save young boys and girls from this.
Amen to that. Do you have a toast?
Gosh, I didn't think about one. Well, I guess, yeah. I guess I would.
Before you
uh,
give a toast,
yeah.
one of our very first ever old fashioned Catholics months ago, I toasted the U.S. Marshals for this reason because
Yep.
they were busting human trafficking.
So good.
Crazy.
And nobody knew. Like we knew why you said it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would, in the way I mean it, not that you toast to people, but as a toast, we can intercede for and pray for the people who are currently being trafficked, who don't know it, that someone will see something and say something, and that they will be delivered, And regardless of that, that they will have peace tonight from the Holy Spirit.
In Jesus' name.
Amen.
I think you just turned a toast into a prayer. That was epic.
Didn't mean to do that.
I think you just raised the bar of toasts.
Now we'll make everybody pray from now on.
For all of our videos on forward.
Yep.
We hope you enjoyed this video and that you found some of the information useful. Check out some of the links down below. This is obviously something that we're very passionate about, and it's something that takes our whole society. It takes a whole village, and we all need to do our part. That's all I have to say about that. Anything from you, Nick?
No, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys made it to the end. Oh, I would say this: share this one with people. If the information is succinct enough and understandable enough, share this one with people. Or if you look in the description below, share some of the links down below to people. And please, that would be my closing thing. Don't walk away from it. Just don't just hit end, or don't just comment. You can comment, but please, don't let it stop. Help out with fixing it and healing people.
Until next time, we're Nick and Kevin, Old Fashioned Catholics. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Cheers.